Hey guys, welcome to another GameXplain discussion. I'm your host, Andre Seegers, and this time we're joined by Ash Paulson, a special guest, Josh Thomas of the BitBlock, and Artsy Omni of Smashified, and of course the infamous Raymond Leak. Okay guys, so yesterday Nintendo's president, Kimishima, outlined his plans for Nintendo in 2016. And as part of that, he mentioned that he wants to get Nintendo back to really good profits, specifically mentioning 100 billion yen over the next few years, which translates to 855 million US dollars. Now again, that is over the next several years. But as part of that, he gave some idea of what Nintendo's planning to do this year that's going to get them onto that path to get to those profits. And among the things he mentioned is the fact that in 2016, Nintendo wants to surprise fans with new ideas, and not just build on old ones. And he also reconfirmed that they'll be talking about Nintendo NX more this year too. However, perhaps the bigger point he made is that it's vital for Nintendo to experiment with new business models, and he confirmed that the first smartphone game will be released in March, being Miitomo. But on top of that, he also announced that there'll be more smartphone games coming this year that feature Nintendo's big characters. And speaking of characters, he also announced that they'll be licensing them out for use in movies as well as TV animes. So I thought I'd get your guys' raw reaction to this at first, so what do you guys think about all this news?
Well, I mean, we've touched on this before, Andre, especially when Palutena was revealed for Smash Brothers, but the idea of a Smash Brothers anime sells itself. That by itself, I mean, that's all they need to do, in my opinion. Just make a Smash Brothers anime, you're good to go for 2016. But no, seriously, that's the first thing I thought of when I heard, TV animes is imagine Smash Brothers, but in animated form. That would be incredible. But, other than the anime part, it seems to be kind of more or less glossing over what we already know. They're working on some sort of theme park thing. We already know that after Miitomo, they were going to make more smartphone games featuring, their actual characters and not just Mii's. So, none of this is really that new, but I guess it's nice to get, confirmation once again.
Mm-hmm. Well, Josh, so I remember, so I know you've had some vocal complaints about some of the Smash Brothers roster.
Oh, you kidder.
Perhaps being a little too anime-based. So I'm curious as to your thoughts on Nintendo making or working with anime productions.
Listen, let's talk about that theme park news. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what anime is, so I don't know what this would be like. I don't know. Animation with Nintendo characters, sure. Why not? I mean, it'd kind of be like Pokemon, but with different themes, right?
I mean, that's kind of an interesting point here, because I've seen a lot of people freaking out on Twitter about Nintendo making anime, and at first it is pretty exciting, but when you look back at their history, it's like, this isn't the first time they've done this, but they had Pokemon, as you mentioned, which is huge.
Kirby had an anime.
They made an Animal Crossing anime movie in Japan, and I actually had I did not even know about this until I just researched it. They even had a freaking F-Zero anime, which even came to the US. Now, granted, most of those are a few years old, so this is kind of exciting in that they're re-exploring it, but it's really nothing new for them. It just, they kind of ignored it for a while, it seems like.
It's time. It's Kid Icarus' turn.
Yeah, we even got a little taste of that with the Kid Icarus Uprising anime shorts that they did a couple years ago.
We also got a taste of that in Kid Icarus Uprising in general. You know what? Just take that game, make a sequel anime out of it, and I'm happy. I adore that whole world, so.
That is kind of one of the worlds they have that would probably lend itself best to an anime. Like the first couple of things that come to mind are either Fire Emblem, just because that's pretty much all story based, and they already have that anime look and connection, I feel like. But then also Kid Icarus, that also was a relatively story heavy based game from Nintendo, and they did such a great job with the presentation of that game. I could easily see it lending itself to an anime. But what's your take on all this, Omni?
So stepping back a little bit, just overall, I think the whole thing sounds pretty promising. It does sort of come across to me as another PR kind of thing, so they've got these prescriptions of what they can say and what they can't say, but I think there's two big takeaways for me, and that those two things are that they're still dedicated to coming up with dedicated hardware, which is of course the NX, and they're also sort of recognizing the fact that Nintendo sort of needs to adapt to the changing landscape, because things are changing. Smartphones is a start to that. The Wii U wasn't the great success that they hoped it would be, so I think Kimishima is probably under the impression that there are some things that could change. Nintendo's kind of had this lineage of leaders, and I feel like Kimishima's a little bit more of an outsider. He's always been rooted in Nintendo's leadership. He was part of the Pokemon Company. But he was also a banker for 27 years, so he's got a deep understanding of what's important with finances.
Right.
And when you're like a financial advisor to somebody, one of the biggest things is, of course, diversification for, say, investments. And I think that principle also applies to running a business. So with Nintendo continuing to try to innovate with something like the NX, that's always been something that they've, been proud to do. And with Iwata's leadership, he's a very creative person. He was a developer for a while, so he always came up with new ways, trying to come up with something that maybe people didn't know they wanted. And that's sort of what the Wii was, but the Wii U wasn't quite that. Mm-hmm. So I feel like when you're trying to come up with high-risk innovations, like hopefully that's what the NX is, you also have to supplement it with something that's lower risk, something that's tried and true, like licensing for anime, licensing for movies. Those are some of the things that I think Kimishima is trying to put more of a focus on, and I think that's good.
That's a really good point. I mean, that's part of the reason why, like, Sony and Microsoft, they're more resilient to changes in the game industry, or just, how their platforms perform on a generation-to-generation basis. Because they're in so many other avenues, whether it's, movies or tech, operating systems in the case of Microsoft, that if the Xbox bombs one generation, it's not a huge deal. Whereas for Nintendo, it's a much bigger issue, such as in the case of the Wii U. So I think diversifying this way, as you mentioned, makes a ton of sense, and it is relatively low risk. The biggest risk they run into is if the final product of the final show isn't good, it could potentially damage their brand. But if the Mario movie didn't damage your brand, I mean, can anything really?
Yeah, seriously.
I am really excited by this, but I love Nintendo's characters, and I've always thought it'd be fun to see them outside their typical game settings. I mean, Nintendo is basically the video game version of Disney. They have all these IPs, they just haven't done nearly as much with them, unlike Disney, which has done a great job on taking their characters and using them outside of just movies. And it would make sense to expand in a similar fashion. They have the characters to do it, they just haven't really done it, and now's kind of the time.
Nintendo as a company, we've always thought of them as a video game company, but I think Nintendo is sort of trying to go in that direction to become like sort of like a Disney kind of company, where it's not just, Disney isn't just about making movies, they're about creating like characters and experiences and things like that. Mm-hmm. And they're a giant company, obviously. Nintendo's nowhere near as big as Disney, but I think trying to come up with things like anime and coming up with movies, or like licensing their characters out for movies, that's a way for them to kind of expand their cultural footprint, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. So I think it's good.
No, it absolutely does. I mean, it'll reach new markets, it'll raise brand awareness of Nintendo's products. I mean, this could be an avenue in which they can bring back some of their older IPs. Like, whereas maybe just bringing it back in game form may not do anything, perhaps bringing it back as an anime or movie first could raise enough brand awareness in order to make another game based on that IP.
Well, are you saying that we could get a Chibi Robo movie? Is that what it's going to take to get a good Chibi Robo game?
Maybe. We got those Pikmin shorts, right? Maybe that was they were testing the waters with that.
I want more of those.
Those were great.
Those were pretty cool.
Yeah, those were really well done. I think like that offered a taste of what they can do outside of games while still being true to the games.
Yeah, definitely.
Between all of this and kind of taking everything together, it seems very clear, especially with the whole Nintendo account system too, the new thing, the Club Nintendo replacement they have in the works. It seems very clear that Nintendo has fully opened up to the idea that they need to get with the times and kind of modernize themselves, and that was something that Iwata was trying to do while he was still alive. Mm-hmm. So it definitely does seem like, for anyone who is still kind of holding out and maybe a little worried that Kimishima wasn't going to kind of further Iwata's ambitions, I think those fears could be put to rest. It does definitely seem that Kimishima is 100% committed to kind of carrying on Iwata's legacy and modernizing Nintendo, which I think is great to see.
Yeah, it seems like Nintendo's in really good hands at this point, just based on what we've heard of what he plans to do with the company. What would you guys personally either expect to see or want to see from Nintendo? Is there a particular game? We already touched on this a little bit with Kid Icarus and Smash, but beyond that, is there anything specific you would like to see or expect to see from Nintendo?
One of my thoughts has been that Kimishima was obviously part of the Pokemon Company, and one of their biggest pillars is the anime. And the company that produces the anime is this company called OLM Incorporated, and they're also responsible for a Animal Crossing animated movie that came out in Japan, and that was pretty well received for those of the people who actually saw it with subtitles. They never localized it for America, but I think one of the things that strikes me as interesting with OLM is that they're very good at capturing like the essence of something in animated form. Like Pokemon still feels like what it should feel like in relation to the games. The Animal Crossing movie definitely felt like Animal Crossing. Even if it's not interactive, it still felt like the world was well represented. So I think that's one of the biggest things that's important. And that's one of the biggest grievances I have with like those older cartoons from back in the 80s that a lot of people like to cite as you know, Nintendo shouldn't do animation because look at this. Well, that was the 80s, you know? Nintendo was a young company back then, at least as a video game company, and the properties that they used for those cartoons weren't that fleshed out yet. You know, Mario was still small sprites, and they had some artwork, obviously, but, you know, they ended up, like, taking Toad and, like, making him take his cap off. That's not a thing. He can't take his cap off. It's part of his head. You'd probably see his brain. But, you know, I think with Nintendo being in the position that they're in now, their intellectual properties have matured, and they'd be able to provide things like model sheets, descriptive, in-depth descriptions of the characters that they want to depict. So I think they're in a good position to license things out. One of the things that I want to see is Splatoon. And a lot of people might like think that's silly because it's a really new idea for Nintendo, but I think the way that that world is represented, like, there isn't a defined main character. So that was sort of the case with Pokemon as well. The character was invented. Satoshi, or Ash, wasn't a character from the games, but he's like an analog of the main character, which is an extension of the player. So they could do the same thing with Splatoon. They could come up with some new characters with names. They're obviously going to be Inklings, right? But the stories could center around maybe the conflict between the Octarians and the Inklings. Like, that was sort of explored in the one-player campaign, but only with, like, a passive way, like with the Sunken Scrolls. They hinted at things. They could also sort of come at it with an approach of, like, a sports-centered anime where they're following a squad as they try to take on the league or something like that. So I think they could do something with Splatoon. There's already a manga, right? Like, they just released a manga for Splatoon.
Oh, really?
I think so. I saw something about that.
I hadn't heard about that.
In the official art booklet that was released in Japan, there's like a lot of, I don't know, I'd call them like comic strip kind of things. I guess that would be like a manga, right?
Yeah.
There's like bits and pieces. I don't know the difference. There's like bits and pieces of that at the end of the book. So yeah, I think they have done like a manga with it.
Well, you know, and even if they didn't do an entire series, I mean, just the fact that Splatoon, you know, like you said, Ani, doesn't have a main character, and, you know, it kind of has that similar structure to Pokemon. I feel like the idea of shorts, kind of like the Pikmin shorts for Splatoon, almost makes perfect sense. Like, that world is so... It just kind of lends itself to having these kind of just wacky, action-packed little, you know, short animation things where the Inklings are doing whatever, because it's such a colorful, wacky world that I feel like Splatoon shorts could easily be a thing.
Yeah, actually, that's what I was going to say. After I watched the original Pikmin shorts, I really loved the idea of us getting, like, a variety show, like just a Nintendo show where you never know what's going to pop up. It's going to be various types of animations. So, like, we have 3D, we have, like, hand-drawn animation. There could be, like, Kirby, Pikmin, Mario, all represented in, like, one episode as shorts. Because that way, you really don't have to worry about, like, oh, can we take this brand and make a whole series out of it? Because, you know, you just kind of do whatever works at the time. And how fun would it be to just have, like, this variety show of, like, getting all this burst of Nintendo goodness in one episode?
It'd be kind of like a little bit like Animaniacs, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like that kind of style where, you know, anything can
That'd be
happen.
pretty cool, actually. I was a big fan of Animaniacs, and actually, I'm sure you are too, Ash, right?
Yeah, just a bit. But that does kind of remind me how much I love, not that it would ever happen, but how much I love the Robot Chicken skits for Nintendo back in E3. It was like 2 years ago, I think.
That's right, that was great.
I would absolutely take like an entire series of Nintendo themed Robot Chicken
Star Fox
shows.
Do Star Fox puppet type of thing.
Oh my god,
totally.
That is almost too perfect. That would be fantastic.
Nintendo owns those puppets, so they could do that.
You know, actually, Star Fox would, I think, have the potential to be a good anime.
I do. Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
Metroid would be another one that has a lot of deep possibilities for story writing.
It does. And actually, now that we're talking about it, I believe, didn't both Metroid and Star Fox have comics back in the day in Nintendo Power?
Yeah.
So I think there is, that kind of set the groundwork. I think both could work.
I'd be all about that.
How about movies? I think we covered anime pretty well. I think movies gets a little bit trickier because I feel like there is like a line between something being, working well in anime and working well in movies.
We did hear, didn't we hear a lot of information about how WreckIt Ralph 2 is going to incorporate Mario in like a big way?
Maybe. I know that they were looking at that they wanted to do that.
There were talks.
Well, I remember in interviews, the director of the first movie, who's also the director of the second one, was talking about how they didn't include Mario because they felt if they were going to do that, they wanted him to be a big part of the main story instead of just being a cameo.
Right.
And WreckIt Ralph 2 is happening, so...
That could be Mario's big screen debut, because we're not counting the 1993 movie.
I don't believe they ever greenlit the WreckIt Ralph 2. I know they definitely talked about it, and it's still under consideration, but I don't think it's confirmed quite yet. But I think it would be good.
Oh, I thought I heard it was confirmed too. I think it is.
Yeah, I think it did
get
confirmed in 2015.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. I loved that movie.
Yeah, so did I.
Same here.
So do you guys have any other thoughts for anything else you'd want to see in movie form?
Metroid. Yeah.
Yeah, Metroid. Or Fire Emblem even could work if it was a big enough series. Not that it is, big enough to get a movie, but I feel like that could work live action.
I could see that. I don't know. That one seems... I could see it, but also seems like it might betray the game a little bit. I don't know.
That's true. Well, yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't want any live action movies from Nintendo. Either animated or CG, period. I don't want any live action.
Really?
You wouldn't want a live action Metroid?
No. I'd rather it be CG. I would not want a live action Metroid.
Real life Samus. Real life Zero Suit Samus you wouldn't want on the big screen.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I can't think of an actress that wouldn't take me out of the experience. Like, not that there aren't a lot of amazing actresses out there, but Samus is, I don't know, like, the Street Fighter movie's awesome because it's terrible and I love watching it because it's awful, but it's not like they ever worked as live action characters. And I kind of feel that way about, Samus or... I don't know. I just think video game movies, at least or Nintendo movies, let's say, should stay out of the realm of live action for me personally. But
so I might agree in general. I think almost most of their properties would lend themselves better to being CG. But I would like to see them experiment with live action. I don't know. When I think of the big screen, I want to see something different than what I'm used to. And I would love to see either Zelda or Metroid in live-action form. I think they could pull it off. If
they already did a Star Fox movie, but for some reason they called it Guardians of the Galaxy. That was strange.
I was going to say, I want to see a live-action Star Fox movie.
Disney did that.
Yeah, there you go. Live-action Fox and Falco.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I think for me, the danger with movie adaptations is that when I think of movie adaptations, I think more of the Western film industry, and Nintendo is a very Japanese company, so when you think of adapting their things to other mediums, I immediately go to animated things, particularly from Japan. So when I think of doing something live action, that's way more of a Western thing to do. Japan has a lot of anime. They have way more anime than live action, I think. So that's the tricky part, because that was one of the things that made it difficult to adapt Mario and Zelda back in the days, because one, it wasn't a lot to work with, but two, it was also more of a Western take on a Japanese idea, and so that's one of the hard things for me. I think of all of the franchises that they could do, the one that does lend itself best to live action would be Metroid, because it was like heavily inspired by a lot of Ridley Scott's material, right? With Alien?
Yeah, that's true.
I think of those, that one makes the most sense. I think Zelda could be CG, like more of a cartoony kind of animated thing. It could be live action, but there's two like halves of Zelda. There's like the Toon Zelda, and there's like the Twilight Princess, slightly more realistic, still cartoony kind of approach. So it's hard to know. I feel like I'd be more readily willing to accept animated stuff, but I'm not opposed to live action, but it would be tricky, in my opinion.
The bigger problem, though, is if they made a Metroid live-action movie. Ridley's too big for the screen.
Yeah, too big for anything.
But I guess, thinking about live action, though, there was that rumor that we have discussed before of Netflix working on a Zelda series. And I feel like that would have to be almost live action. I mean, I guess they could do CG, but I don't know if they'd have the budget to really do Zelda justice. I feel like it would almost have to be live action in order to make that even possible. And I think Zelda could work. It would be tough, but Netflix has worked. Netflix is looking at like Daredevil and I forget the other Marvel show they just launched. Like both of those have done incredibly well, and I would trust them working with Nintendo.
I would want to see that for Zelda, but give me an animated movie in the style of Wind Waker before anything live action. Hell, give me a half-hour cartoon. Give me a half-hour cartoon series, a whole season of Wind Waker cartoon 30-minute animations. Done.
Well,
you've sold me.
You're gonna need multiple episodes just for Link crossing the ocean. So.
That's true. Well said. No, but honestly, like I think an animated series exploring that part of the timeline, that world, and more in depth in that art style, starring that version of Link would be so cool.
How do you guys feel about movie adaptations sort of taking on a separate canon, especially for Zelda? Like, you know how Marvel, they've got their cinematic universe and then they've got the comic universe, and they're sort of separate. There's different interpretations there. Because I sort of don't want... I'm fearful of movie adaptations trying to squeeze into the timeline that's already way too convoluted. So I wonder if they could sort of take a different approach by like creating a parallel interpretation of the events of Zelda, maybe pulling from the game's plot lines, maybe coming up with something more original. I feel like that might be a good approach.
I'd be fine with that.
I think they'd have to.
That would probably be the ideal approach, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, they've already kind of done it to some degree with the Mario games, where you have like the different spin-off series like Paper Mario and Mario and Luigi, where none of them really feel like part of the same world. And even Zelda, like, even though they have the timeline, it feels like Nintendo doesn't really care about it much. Like, they almost treat each installment as its own, with like some loose connections. So I feel like I would love for whoever handles like a TV show or movie adaptation to just have a fresh slate where they can just pick and choose whatever the elements they want, and otherwise just make it their own thing that can best fit into the medium they're going for.
Well, to my knowledge, if we're splitting hairs, Nintendo's already done this with the Mario movie, because as far as I know, I'm not completely sure, but I'm fairly certain that the Mario movie does not take place in the current Mario video game canon.
Are you sure? I was sure.
I'm just guessing. It's just a guess on my part, but...
Dang, I can never look at the movie the same way again now.
I mean, if you want to see, John Leguizamo every time you fire up Luigi's Mansion, be my guest. That's fine.
He didn't have a mustache in the movie. How can he be Luigi without a mustache?
Yeah, well, just because it's canon, that was just a younger Luigi before he grew the mustache.
Yeah.
See, that's okay.
I was holding back suggesting this just because I didn't want to anger Andre, but since when do I not want to anger Andre?
Yeah,
Let's get a Super Mario Sunshine movie.
Oh my god.
I could even take that one step further. What if they finally unveil this, Nintendo theme park thing, and the Mario attraction is a Mario Sunshine themed, you're shooting water at paint stains.
It's just a water park?
It's just a water park. It's a Super Mario Sunshine water park. That's it.
Oh,
I'm down with that. That sounds amazing.
I'd love that.
Yeah.
I don't think
Andre,
would,
you're
though.
alone in this.
It seems that way. Of course, needless to say, I am most excited about the prospects of a Nintendo theme park. I just want to know more about that. Like, what are they doing with that? And unfortunately, it's going to be, even though, who knows when we might find out more news about it, it's going to be years before we actually can go to it. And that saddens me.
It's when we first talked about that, I remember you were like, oh, but I wish it was Disney. And I was like, no, I'm okay with that because Universal will do it quicker. And now it's like, I don't know, if they're not going to do it quicker, I wish it were Disney as well.
Yeah.
Because Disney would do better.
Yeah, we haven't heard anything yet. Like, we've just heard, like, the very vaguest of an idea that's going to happen. But when? We need details.
I know. Well, Universal has filed a lot of stuff with the state of Florida for more construction in their parks, so...
Well... and what's funny is they had even started work on that new King Kong ride before even announcing it. Like, everyone already knew what it was, and they still hadn't officially announced it. So maybe Nintendo Land's already well into development, and they just haven't said anything.
They're really bad at hiding stuff. I mean, they had, like, a giant King Kong statue outside the ride, and they're like, we don't know what it's going to be, guys! There'll be a big Mario mushroom pillar outside, and they're like, I don't know what this is going to be.
Yep. Seriously.
I'm ready for that. Oh my gosh. Well, Universal likes to really toy with my emotions, so there's a chance this won't happen.
Well, do you guys have any final thoughts about anything we discussed or anything more you wanted to bring up before we wrap it up here?
I do question the veracity of at least one of Kimishima's, points. Specifically the one where he says that Nintendo wants to surprise fans with new ideas and not build on old ones.
Yeah.
I'm all about that, and that could very well be true, and that may be just in terms of the NX, but I kind of find that funny when looking at the first half of Nintendo's release schedule this year, because we have stuff like Mario & Luigi Paper Jam, Star Fox Zero, Fire Emblem Fates. These are all sequels that build on, that are all very closely rooted in the prior, in prior games in that series. Like Fire Emblem Fates is obviously very aesthetically similar to Fire Emblem Awakening. Star Fox Zero is basically Star Fox 64 expanded. At least that's what it seems like so far. Mm-hmm. Mario & Luigi Paper Jam literally runs on the Mario & Luigi Dream Team engine. So taking that into account, I'm a little shaky on what exactly he means by surprising fans with new ideas, because I would say, honestly, the only game coming out in the first half of 2016 that kind of satisfies that is Pokken Tournament. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that these other games are not going to be good because they're based on prior ideas. They're all going to be great, I'm sure. I'm just saying that specific claim doesn't hold much water to me at this current moment in time.
I think it's basically like a PR-friendly way of saying, we recognize, that our recent ventures have been sort of flawed and they sort of failed. They weren't as successful. So we're committed to exploring new ideas. And that's basically, don't hold on to the idea of us doing more Wii-branded stuff. We're going to be abandoning that and, well, not abandoning it, but we're going to be moving on from that and coming up with something new because we recognize that it didn't work. That's sort of how I interpret it. Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you're right, and that's kind of what I see as well. I'm just splitting hairs. I just kind of thought it was funny, especially when you consider I haven't even mentioned Twilight Princess HD yet. So, and that's another one. So,
I mean, doing unfamiliar things with familiar faces is not really something Nintendo hasn't done in the past. I mean, they do it all the time, even now, like Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival. That's technically doing something different, and Chibi Robo Ziplash, that's different. But just being different doesn't mean better. But with like the GameCube, we got a ton of stuff that was really thinking outside of the box and really different, and he did it well.
They were thinking inside the box. It was a GameCube, Josh. Jeez.
All right, so Andre is now fired from GameXplain. I am the new emperor here.
Well, I quit.
Oh, you know what? I was going to be a much better boss than Andre. There was going to be free cookies every day.
I guess I'll consider staying on then, if we're talking about free cookies.
But yeah, I mean, I agree. I love new things with old ideas, but doing that alone is not good enough. You still have to make it good.
That's a catch, right? I love when they try new things, like with Sticker Star, but I want the things to be good, unlike Sticker Star.
Well, Chibi Robo Ziplash is probably a better example of that. 2D Chibi Robo. I'm still mad about that. There's a new idea that...
I'm waiting for the Chibi Robo make-believe to happen.
Well, you don't have to wait that long, maybe.
I'm not surprised. So the main thing I really do hope, though, that getting back to the core comment here of Nintendo trying new things in 2016, is I really hope that means, assuming the NX launches this year, that they're not launching with another new Super Mario Brothers game.
Oh, God.
They don't have. They can't.
You know what?
Mario Maker. It's a thing.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, honestly, they've almost kind of designed themselves into a corner with Super Mario Maker, because really, is there a need for another full 2D Mario game in the new Super Mario Bros. Style now that game's out?
I will go as far as saying there's really no need for another 2D platformer from Nintendo at all for many, many years. And now I'm to the point where it's like, go back to doing like 3D adventure games. I miss those.
You know what, if Yoshi's Woolly World wasn't in my top 3 of 2015, I might agree with you, but that game was so brilliant that I don't want Nintendo to stop.
Did you play Epic Yarn?
I did play Epic Yarn.
And you liked Yoshi more?
I like Yoshi a lot more.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I don't want them to stop either, but I think I would like to have a better balance.
Yeah,
because like Tropical
definitely.
Freeze, like I love the hell out of Tropical Freeze. That was fantastic.
Right.
With that said, I still think they've leaned a little bit too heavily on the platformers recently.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's almost turning my perspective of them. Like, when I played Woolly World, by that time I was just like, okay, it's another 2D platformer, all right.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's a better game than I even kind of know, but because I've played so many games that feel very similar to that, I'm just kind of to the point where I'm a little burned out.
Mm-hmm. No, I can understand that. And then you of course, you also have these high-profile indie titles like Shovel Knight that kind of fill in the already very few gaps there are in the 2D platformer release schedule. So it does definitely feel like there's been kind of an oversaturation of 2D platformers on Nintendo systems recently. Right. So I can see where you're coming from.
Alright, I think that about wraps up for us here, so thanks guys for watching. If you liked our discussion, make sure to like and follow us on Facebook and Twitter at GameXplain. You can find links to them in the description below, which is a good way to keep updated on everything we post. And, of course, if you want to check out what our guests do, let's go ahead and have them tell you about it. So Josh, where can people find you at?
They can find me at the BitBlock pretty much anywhere on the internet. YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, I don't know, any social media thing.
And how about you, Omni?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at ArtsyOmni, and if you're interested in artwork, then you can check out my collaborative channel where my team and I are drawing characters in the style of Smash 4, so all those characters that didn't make it in the game, we can dream about it together. And the best way to find that is probably to go to my personal channel, which I'm launching this year, but for now it's nothing. It's youtube.com/ArtsyOmni, and you can find links to all the stuff I'm up to from there. So check out Smashified, and yeah, that's it.
Sounds great, perfect. And of course, keep an eye on GameXplain for lots more discussions like these and other things gaming as well. Alright, thanks guys. Bye.